Hey, this is Blake Sloan. I've been selling real estate over 14 years, and our team of highly trained professionals, along with our unmatched marketing, has sold thousands of homes here in the Myrtle Beach area, and this is how we do it.
We all know what to do, right? All of us deep down somewhere know what to do every second of every day. The problem is what? We don't do it, right? Myself included. And so it's a little bit more difficult on the business side versus, the agent side, because business, there's 50 things I need to do, right? I'm not sure what to do, but ultimately there's a whisper inside, the voice, whatever it is, that says, I need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And sometimes we tend to ignore that. And every time that we ignore that, what happens? We're going to pay a price, right? Myself included, pays a price. And so that's one thing that we got to know as agents, as we come in. The number one battle that you have and everyone has in this business, and especially even our team, is the battle in your own mind with yourself about doing what you need to do. And the one thing that was kind of an aha is that it's every second of every day. And so we got to reaffirm and reassure ourselves and recommit, so to speak, over and over and over every day. Right? That's why we break down the 4 keys and the daily wins, because that's got to be a full commitment and you got to own that every day, right? Again, like I said, myself included, there's a bunch of things that I need to do, right? From a new site, on the seller side, there's all these things that I've been knowing I needed to do that is costing me, but looking back over an entire quarter, guess what? There's certain things that I know I should have got done that end up getting in reactionary mode and missing out on what helps move that needle forward, right? And so that's the one thing that, not a huge aha, but we all know what to do. We just don't do it, right? And so I can come here and talk about some, really cool tools. I'm going to share some stuff in a minute, but ultimately we know what to do all day, every day. And so you got to ask yourself, how many times in that daytime do we take the right road when we should have gone to the left, right? And so that was a big aha for me and what kind of us in that aspect of it, but also continuing to master everything, right? There is this mastery. One of the things we talked about, I'm going to share you just kind of a process of how getting through, especially for new agents or people that are fairly new, right, is true mastery. And we gave the example, Garrett talked about the example of jiu-jitsu, right? Or, BJJ, whatever it is. Do you know how long it takes to get a black belt?
Like 10, 15 years.
At least 10 years if you're doing 5 days a week plus, and that's a lot of hours a day, right? That's the fastest people get, right? And so what happens is how everyone shows up is they show up for what? If you go into that, you have to go with a mindset of what?
Long game.
The long game, which is mastery. But in real estate, what happens? We come in and get frustrated in 2 friggin' weeks, right? Well, I don't get it. But the reality is, in that situation, you still suck at sales, right? Same thing you see in BJJ. You think you're doing pretty good until you go with somebody who's done it for 8, 10 years, and what happens? You get destroyed in 2 seconds, right? And so it's important to understand, like, having the mindset of no finish line in what we do, but you got to have the mindset of mastery, right? So when you go in and do, BJJ or anything like that, you have that mindset of going there that day just to learn. But you're not going to get great in 2 or 3 times, right? It's going to take years to do that. And so obviously we want to shorten that curve for you, but you got to have that long-term mastery part. And I was going to share kind of a mindset thing that we kind of go through, that I kind of wrote down, that helps us kind of understand overall what we go through here and kind of what you're going to be able to do. And it kind of came from that aspect where the overall part, the first part we got to do is slow down. Meaning that, what's that mean for you guys? Slow down.
Analyze everything around you.
Taking time to master the fundamentals, and sometimes taking time, instead of continuing to pound at the activity the wrong way, pausing the activity to get it right and then going back to it.
Yep. Here's a perfect example. Memorize the fucking questions from last week, right? Very simple. But what happens? You learn some really cool stuff. You get 10 questions to ask investors, and 0 people know them without having to look at their notes. That's the problem, right? So the reality is what we're not doing. Not slowing down enough to memorize the questions, to work on ourselves, to work towards mastery, right? The mastery is what comes in from slowing down, practicing over and over and over, right? Same thing like you do in a martial arts. You're going to do the same move how many times? Thousands and thousands and thousands of times to get that. But in our business, right, we won't take 30 minutes to slow down and memorize 10 questions for investors that we all agree will give us an advantage to even memorize that to make some money. But then on the back end, wonder why we don't have the closing ability or the influence, or why I still struggle with investors sometimes, right? And so part of this understanding, I've got to be able to slow down, right, in this aspect to get out the chaos, so when I can evaluate where I'm at, what's going on, where do I need to get better at, and actually do what? Learn it, right? 10 great questions on last Tuesday. No one knows all 10 questions, or even a few of them, right? And so part of that is that we got to be able to slow down to look for mastery. And so what I'm talking about that is this has got to be something that's done daily. And that's kind of what we talk about Core 4. You know, there's got to be something that's built into your calendar for you to learn, practice, master. Learn, practice, master, right? And so that's the one thing that you got to make sure that you're doing on the listing side, also on the buy side, is to slow down and master your same moves and what you're doing. And that a lot of times for us too, it's going to be Jordan Belfort stuff. Like over and over and over, not just 1 or 2 times, right? Going through the course. I know a few people went through a couple, modules last week, but that's got to be continuous, right? And so that's something that's important for us to understand. Number 2 has got to be submit. What do you think that means?
Understand that you suck. And admit it to yourself in your core. Like, I'm not as great as I say I am.
Yep, right? I got to submit to the process. I got to submit to the realization of where I'm at in the sales and influence category, right? Meaning that, hey, look, maybe I'm not master yet. I'm not a master of this yet. And there's so many things, because unless you submit, you're never going to see the true problem or the true issue. And for us, it could be anywhere. It could be the speed that you talk. It could be the tonality that you have. It could be the words that you use, and it could be the order of the words that you use. And so until we're willing to submit and say, you know what, I need to fix this or figure out where I'm at, or submit to the mastery, right? You're not going to be able to look and see what the challenges are and where you're missing those holes or those gaps in regards to the client, right? Or the overall influence, because there's so many points, and as I've analyzed this lately, there's so many points in the process we're losing the client. On the phone initially, it could be tonality on the initial phone call, right? It could be the follow-up. It could be, am I even taking the time to confirm the appointment via phone call and text message, right? Perfect example of that. And so the reality is, the most of the time, where are we losing them at? Once we get face-to-face, and then showing a property, and then get them under contract. Why? Because they're judging the crap out of you every single second. The same thing on the seller side. Guess what they're doing? Judging the crap out of you every single interaction. Do you call them back? How long does it take to call them back? Are you answering their phone calls? Are you answering their emails? Right? Whatever it is, they're looking for a reason to pull back. On the seller side, you don't see them disappear as much. They just get pissed off and want to cancel. On the buyer side, though, what happens? They disappear. And they still buy from somebody. It's just not you. But they don't have the heart to tell you, I didn't really fully understand, or I didn't feel like you could actually serve me. And we'll teach you a little bit on that, but you got to understand. But here's the thing. If you're not aware of it, it's going to kill you every single time. You might get 1 out of 10, and I know it's found that the universe will give you just enough to keep you ignorant of it, right? Where you'll get the 1 or 2 out of 10, so you don't investigate the 6 out of 10 that disappeared on you, right? But I got the 1 or 2, and I'm doing okay, and I got my bills paid, but the reality is, how much more are you leaving on the table? And so that's important. It could be, and Katie brought this up too about some lesson yesterday, is like, it may be how you're organizing your database. And how are you following up with the right people in the right order and giving the right ones the right attention? And that's another big thing that people miss out on, right? They come and look at this as linear, but ultimately it's a huge game of chess. All day, every day, in regards to how we have this. So we got to have that mindset overall in regards to how we do that, right? And we got to make sure what? I'm submitting to the process, like I mentioned, and submitting to mastery. And submitting sometimes, right, means that I've got to be willing to say, all right, I suck right now at this, or I'm okay at this right now. I'm getting better, but there's still a lot more layers to go. And that's true for all of us, right? It's true for me in business, true for me in sales and influence. It's true for you all, especially in anybody that's in this game of sales. Why? Because everything's changing every single day. How consumers interact, how consumers answer their phones. So you got to be super paranoid and really kind of looking at everything, right? Do they answer from this phone number, or do they answer from this phone number? If I call them and the phone doesn't go through, what do I do, Joe? Call them from a different phone. Right? Because I've got to be obsessed with figuring out where my holes are at, right here. And that's kind of the one part. Now, here's the one thing that really everyone runs into on the sales side, especially in this business, right? First, you have to do what? You slow down. Then we got to submit. What happens next, you think? There's a struggle. This is the pain part, right? So anything from a mastery standpoint, first to slow down, then submit, and then what happens? There's a learning process that we all must go through, and we all have to be willing to embrace. Because the struggle is where the growth comes in. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
And so this is also where you're making that switch from unconscious incompetence, right, to conscious incompetence. And then ultimately you make that swing up the hill to be able to start growing and seeing some new tools and seeing some new things that allows us to be able to say, you know what, I think I got this, right? The problem with most people, though, is they don't really hammer this part. They want to run from this right here. And so what happens in most cases is they'll go back here and they live in this loop between kind of these two, right? And they're just doing okay, and it's a constant battle. And then you see people in real estate will fight it for a while, then what happens? They get out, right? This happens in our business all day, every day. Not necessarily at company as much, but it still happens in the company as well, no matter how good your systems, no matter how good your leads are, because people got to be willing to embrace the struggle and go through this part here, right? But the cool thing is, if you go through this, right, and you get through the struggle, and you obviously go through the parts here, I'm slowing down, submitting to it, I know I'm okay struggle. Here's the thing, the struggle is different when your mindset's different. So if I'm looking at the struggle, hey, look, here's the deal, I got to get good at sales, it's going to take me a long time, it's going to take me thousands of hours to get great at this, the struggle's not so bad. Now, if I look at the struggle, I want to get to this thing, I want to be amazing in a month, right, or 2 months, and I don't have that much sales history, guess what, how painful month 2 is? Very painful, because your mindset is that you wanted to master this and get your black belt in 1 month. And so the reality is that you're not. And here's the other part of that, is the struggle will last a lot less if you're willing to go back and do number 1 and number 2. Most people will do what every day? They just show up and live in the struggle and can't figure out why they're in the struggle. Because they're not going home and practicing their questions. They're not going home and learning stuff. They're not going home and studying stuff. They're just doing what? Showing up every day, hoping to get better by getting punched in the face. And ultimately, that's what happens, right? As we come and show up, we show up right in time. I'll roll in 2 minutes for the huddle, and then I do the huddle, and I grind all day, and I go home and watch some football and go to sleep and do the same thing next day, right? Some people do that. And they wonder why the struggle lasts so long. And so the deeper you're willing to go in 1 and 2 here and the slow down to submit, right, the less the struggle is going to be from a long-term perspective. Now, on the flip side of that, you got to be willing to embrace the struggle mentally. Why? Because that's what helps you kind of find some enjoyment in that, right, to be able to find growth. Right? When I go to the gym in the mornings, very, very difficult, right? You're out of breath, all this stuff. It sucks very bad, but guess what happens right when you get done? You feel amazing, right? Because you push through that struggle both physically. It's the same thing on the mental side. You don't want to live in this every day, but you got to just be okay from the embracement standpoint. Understanding every struggle I face, I got to be looking for one thing. I'm looking for growth. Because if you just sit there and struggle and you don't change what you're doing and how you act and how you talk and how you do all these things, you're going to continue to live in the struggle until life beats you up. And so it doesn't really matter what you do and what type of industry it is. The great news in our business, most people, the masses, will not fight through the struggle enough. So once you get good, you have a skill set that no one else can touch. And you have an advantage over the masses who are not willing to go through, right, the overall slowdown, the submitting to the process, the submitting to mastery, and overall struggle. And just like the overall example with the BJJ or jiu-jitsu, whatever, the last part of this is strike. This is the part that's the most important. That's obviously what you want to do in regards to business. So I get part of this, I get understanding, I get the good stuff down, and then boom, now I'm able to strike in regards to what I do. It's the same thing I do daily in my stack, right? Figure out what's going on and slow down. What's going on, submit to the process, figure out, all right, I got some stuff I need to figure out here, right? Where am I struggling? I'm willing to struggle. I go through the stories, I go through my processes, I go through all these things I'm doing, and I look at where to strike daily. And so this is something that you guys need to be willing to do daily too, in your overall process of what you're doing. That's why you break down the 4 keys into your daily win. But overall, I got to slow down, submit to the process, submit to mastery, submit to myself, meaning that I don't necessarily know what to do all the time, and I'm not as good as I think I am. Because the minute that we think we are is the minute that we get killed. Right? We can feel it, we can see it. And so deep down, if we're not able to go in and really truly investigate, understand where am I missing these holes at, this struggle here is going to be a lot more painful, a lot more powerful. Are you guys with me on that? And so this part, though, it becomes fun, and it's going to go back, right? You're going to have to build this up daily, right? Some days I strike, I do well. Sometimes I strike, I don't do well. And so every single time I got to go back and be able to look and say where I'm at, what's going on. But most cases, you all know what to do.